Ellie and Endo Episode 2, The Monster of Glucovale. In the quiet village of Glucovale, villagers whispered of a terrifying beast, one that made the villagers feel dizzy and shake. When the Healthcare Professional Headquarters, or HCP HQ, heard of the trouble, they sent Ser Endo, his clever squire Ellie, and their loyal diapals Ellie's Hypo hogger hedgehog named Hogs, who carried her insulin and supplies, and Endo's positivity panda called Pads, whose positivity was always infectious. The team arrived as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting eerie shadows across the village. The frightened villagers were huddled in their homes, peeking out from behind curtains. The elder left his shelter to speak to them.
What happened here?
Ser Endo asked the trembling elder.
The monster comes from the old clinic, across the woods.
The elder whispered.
It's taken many of us. Beware.
Ellie tightened her grip on her bow.
We'll stop it.
Pads gave a determined huff to show his support, and so the team trekked through the woods towards the clinic. The clinic loomed ahead, its windows shattered, walls crumbling. The air smelled of old medicine and something sour. As they entered the old building, suddenly, Hogs let out a screech. Ellie turned just in time to see a hulking shape emerge from the shadows, glowing eyes, twisted limbs. It was a hyper troll, or so Ellie thought. Without hesitation, Ellie loaded her bow with an insulin-infused arrow and let it fly. The arrow struck true, sinking into the beast's thick hide.
I got it.
Ellie cheered, but her victory was short-lived. The monster let out a bone-rattling roar and began to grow, its eyes flashing bright blue, its limbs swelling with strength.
Run, Ellie!
Endo shouted, pulling her back. They darted into a nearby corridor, breathing heavily. Ellie's mind raced.
Why didn't it work? That was infused with insulin.
Ser Endo shook his head.
It's not a hypertroll, it's a hypohydra. More insulin just makes it stronger. It must have been feeding on the leftover insulin here at the clinic. We need glucose to defeat it.
Ellie's eyes widened.
Glucose, of course.
Suddenly, the hypohydra appeared again in the hallway, casting a confusion charm. Endo put himself in the way of the spell, saving Ellie and Hogs from the effects. His eyes glazed over, and he staggered away into the fog of the building. Ellie scrambled to her feet, grabbing Hogs and diving into the next room.
Endo!
Ellie cried, but he didn't respond. It was up to her now. Ellie checked her hypo-hogger's bag, but she had forgotten to pack any glucose for the trip.
Darn, of all the times to forget my glucose.
They crept through the darkened clinic, avoiding the monster's heavy footsteps and low growls. Pads found them at the end of the hall and gestured them into an old supply storeroom. Just before the hypohydra made another pass in its patrol of the hallways, Pads pointed to a box hidden underneath a pile of old supplies. It was labeled glucose tabs.
Yes.
Ellie congratulated herself. She grabbed a handful, crushing them into a fine powder. She coated her arrow with the sparkling glucose and drew the arrow into her bow.
Let's finish this,
she whispered. Ellie stepped out into the hallway. The hypohydra spotted her instantly, roared, and began charging at her. Ellie stood firm, aimed carefully, and released. The glucose-infused arrow struck the beast's chest. It howled, shrinking and fading, until nothing remained but a faint, sweet scent in the air. Ser Endo blinked, the confusion charm lifting.
Ellie, you did it,
he said, as he emerged from the lifting fog. Ellie grinned.
No, we did it. And next time, I'll stop and think before I act. Now I know the difference between hyper and hypo.
Pads and Hogs shared a high five. The missing villagers also started to emerge from the fog. The team led them back to the village, where the people cheered. Glucovale was safe again, thanks to Ser Endo, Ellie, and their diapals. But Ellie knew the real victory was understanding that too much insulin causes hypoglycemia, while not enough insulin leads to hyperglycemia. Knowing the difference could save lives, in Glucovale and beyond.